Liesel Wilson rediscovers her heritage with Welsh tunes and a story. This might just be the golden age of Celtic music. If you could name your own beer, how would you pick the name? And can a love of travel lead to the love of your life? It's all on Pub Songs and Stories, show number 250. Welcome to Pub Songs and Stories. This is the virtual public house for musicians to share the stories and inspiration behind their music with your host, Mark Gunn. Subscribe to the podcast at pubsong.com. Greetings once again. This is Mark Gunn, and I am so happy to be here to talk about the golden age of Celtic music and Liesel Wilson and her awesome music and share one of my songs. There's so much going on, and I appreciate you subscribing to this podcast. If you haven't done so yet, again, go to pubsong.com to sign up or send an email to sing@pubsong.net. Before I get started, I do want to let you know that today's show is brought to you, as always, by my gun runners on Patreon. Big thanks to James Bryan and Gail Perrin, who are my newest patrons. And I tell you, I really appreciate everyone who becomes a patron of my music. It really helps immensely. And I had a few people drop out of Patreon recently, and you can feel it. It's one of the reasons why I like having the very low levels, just $5 a month for my Patreon page. It's a lot easier when I was talking to my friend Mikey, and he had a patron who was signed up at $100 per month, which is just fantastic, except when they drop out. Then all of a sudden you're like, ooh, oh, that hurt a lot. But you know, whatever you are willing to pledge, you can do any amount. For the basic level over on my Patreon page, it's just $5 per month. But you know, you go in for $1 or $2 or $3, whatever you can afford, and most of the stuff ends up with you as well. So, you know, go check that out. So the other day I was with Inara. She flipped on a show that I was sitting next to her by the TV, and she flipped on Julie and the Phantoms, which I don't know if you've seen this. There's a show on Netflix, and I absolutely love this show. It's a show about this girl whose mom, I think her mom meets this band who's back in the 90s, who's about to hit it big, their big gig, and then they all accidentally die, or I think that's accidentally die. And then 25 years later, while the woman's daughter, who is now a teenager, is cleaning out her garage where the band used to live and play, the band pops back into existence as ghosts, and their music can be heard by living people, but that's about it. And they begin collaborating. It's just a fun, feel-good show with a great story and some fantastic music. It's not very Celtic at all. It's not Celtic at all, but it's really awesome. So if you get a chance to check it out, it's over on Netflix, and I'm bummed that they decided to stop after one season. So feel free to drop Netflix an email and say, hey, we want more Julie and the Phantoms. Once you see it, you'll probably be just the same way. So I'm just putting that out there. Spread the word. Anyways, what are you doing while listening to Pub Songs and Stories? I love your thoughts and feedback. You can take a picture of yourself or where you are, or what one of these stories reminds you of, and post it on social media. Use the hashtag Pub Stories so I can find it and share your story. You can also share on social between now and St. Patrick's Day. If you do that, I will give you a free download of an album of your choice. Just post it on social. Drop me an email. Again, you can send it to sing@pubsong.net. And you could also win a free CD. So go share. I'm going to start looking into that. So stay tuned. All right, upcoming shows. On March 2nd, I have another Coffee with the Celtfather. It's at 11 a.m. Eastern. March 10th is a St. Patrick's Day live stream. It's part of the DragonCon Filk music track. Details about that will be coming. March 5th, I added a show at the Bold Monk Brewery here in Atlanta. March 12th is Ironshield Brewing in Lawrenceville, Georgia. March 13th, Three Taverns Brewery in Decatur. And March 25th through 27th, I'll be at MidSouthCon in Memphis. And then in early April, I'll be at Sherwood Forest Fair for the first 2 weekends. I hope to see you at one of those events. Meantime, I want to play some music. This is Tuatha Danann. Track is called The Dream One Dreamt from Nomine, Eireann. There's a lot of new music added to our Best of 2022 playlist on Spotify. We also added another playlist over on Amazon Music, and I'm very pleased that my track Bright Side of Everything, which features Screeched In, has been added to that playlist, along with Tuatha Danann. I'll tell you about that in just a moment. But first, Vince Conaway wrote on Facebook, "When I started playing Renaissance fairs in the 90s, I was told that I'd miss the high water mark of the 80s. Now I see people in the community romanticizing the 90s and aughts, and can't help but think that we need to focus on the present and remember that we're currently living someone's golden age." I love that quote. It really got me thinking about, Celtic music. If you think about Celtic music, there was a golden age of Celtic music. You still talk about it. Bands like the Clancy Brothers and Tommy Makem, the Dubliners, the Wolf Tones, the Chieftains, of course. Many of these bands are still playing and doing stuff or whatnot, but it was sort of like a golden age, and the list goes on and on. There's a lot of spectacular bands in Celtic music. But one of the things I've been doing with the Irish and Celtic Music podcast is realizing that this is a golden age. We are living in a golden age of Celtic music. Early on when I started the podcasts, and before that, even with the Irish and Celtic Music magazine, when it was just a newsletter, there were so many amazing bands on mp3.com. And then all of a sudden, a lot of these bands slowly got online. And next thing you know, their music was blowing up in various places. And now I have the podcasts where I get to share those best of songs. And there's so many amazing songs being put out there. And I'm so pleased that I get to be a part of sharing that music, keeping it alive, both through the playlists that are, going up on Spotify and Amazon, but also through the Irish and Celtic Music podcast. Of course, every year I host the Celtic Top 20, which is where I play the top 20 Irish and Celtic songs and tunes from the previous year, the year that you're just a part of. And I'm compiling that list right now for the Best of 2022. And patrons of the Irish and Celtic Music Podcast, not mine, but patrons of the Irish and Celtic Music Podcast can vote for their favorites in each episode. And the new voting for this year has been spectacular. There's so many new votes. So many people are involved in the voting process, which is fantastic because not only is it super easy, but it helps me to help these bands a little bit more in a newer way. You kind of have to adapt to the times and, playlists while, Spotify. People like to complain about Spotify, and I think I talked about this a couple times last time or something, but people like to complain about Spotify that doesn't pay, but it does provide a quick and easy way to experience new music. And when you have a playlist that people are into and they're listening to and enjoying the music, then all of a sudden you are helping the bands. And so my goal with, doing this playlist, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time creating playlists and such. I'm doing it once a week, which is very manageable. But one of the great things about it is it helps these artists get their music heard, which is my biggest goal. Originally, I was thinking, when people voted in the Celtic Top 20, that I would just pick like the one or two best tracks, and it's usually coming in about 2 to 4, I guess. But I'm willing to do more if it's a truly spectacular show, just because, if it's going to help these bands, fantastic. That's ultimately what this is all about. So there are some new bands that were added to the Best of 2022 playlist. Again, Screeched In and yours truly was added with the Bright Side of Everything track that we released a few weeks back. Tuatha Danann was added. Of course, you heard them a moment ago. Beyond the Pale, Taita, the Barley Boys, Anlar, and Hair of the Dog. This is the Little Beggarman from their album Donegal.
Skillyada lum diddly 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 lum diddly skillyada diddly lum diddly skillyum diddly lum diddly. I am a little beggar man, a begging I have been for 80 or more on this little Isle of Green. I'm known from a Liffey down to Sigew, and I'm known by the name of Old Johnny Doo. Of all the trades are going, now sure begging is the best. When a man gets tired, he can sit down and rest. He begs for his dinner, he has nothing else to do but to slip around the corner with his old rigatoo. Skillyada diddly lum diddly skillyum diddly lum diddly skillyada diddly lum diddly skillyum diddly lum diddly. I slept in a barn one night in Caravan. A wet night came on and I slept until the dawn. Holes in the roof and the rain coming through, and the rats and the cats, they were playing peekaboo. Who should awaken but the woman of the house, with her white spotted apron and a calico blouse. She began to frighten and I said, who should I? Don't be afraid, Mom, it's only Johnny Doo. Skilly-yada diddly-yada lum-da-da-lay, skilly-yum-day diddly-yada lum-da-da-lay, skilly-yada diddly-yada lum-da-da-lay, skilly-yum-day diddly-yada lum-da-da-lay. I met a little flaxen-haired girl one day. Good morning, little flaxen-haired girl, I did say. Good morning, little beggarman, how do you do? With your rags and your tags and your old rigadoo. I'll buy a pair of leggings and a collar and a tie, and a right fine lady I will fetch by and by. I'll buy a pair of goggles and we'll cover them blue, and an old-fashioned lady I will make of you. Over the road with me pack on me back, over the fields with me great heavy sack, holes in me shoes with me toes peeking through, singing skin-a-rick-a-doodle, this is old Johnny Doo. I must be going to bed for it's getting late at night. The fire's all raked and out goes the light. Now you've heard the story of me old rig-a-doo. It's good night and God be with you, this is old Johnny Doo. Hi, hi, skiddly-yada-lay, skilly-yum-day-diddly-yada-lum-day-diddly, skilly-yada-diddly-yada-lum-day-diddly, skilly-yum-day-diddly-yada-lum-day-diddly.
It's the story of Welsh music. Today we meet Liesel Wilson. Liesel has been playing fiddle and violin for most of her life. She began playing Chinese eru during her Chinese language studies in high school and college. She specializes in singing in languages besides English, including Mandarin Chinese, Gaelic, Irish, early Scots, Russian, Spanish, and Welsh. She is a member of the Blue Canvas Orchestra and Chants Ensemble. She has performed throughout the U.S. and Scotland as a member of Willow Green, and they were added to the Irish and Celtic Music podcast last year along with her own solo music. And it's the Welsh music that we will visit today as Liesel tells the story of her Welsh Beast set. I'll let Liesel Wilson tell you the story.
My name is Liesel Wilson, and today I'm going to tell you about the inspiration behind track 2 on my album, affectionately titled The Welsh Beast Set, and what a journey it was to verify the traditional nature of the tunes. It's a set of 5 Welsh fiddle tunes. My fascination with Welsh music began when I was a stay-at-home mom, and when my baby would be napping, I did genealogical research. I discovered that we have quite a lot of Welsh heritage from colonial times, and since I love playing tunes and singing songs from around the world, I began to ask, what does the Welsh language sound like? What does traditional Welsh music sound like? And over the past decade, I've been on quite a journey to learn about it. It's been a personal journey as a lost Welsh daughter, reconnecting with part of my heritage. I learned some very basic Welsh, and I learned how to say the name of that one town in Wales famous for being the longest place name in Europe. It goes like Llanfair Pwll Gwingl Goger Chwrn Drobl Llantysilio Gogogoch. That's a fun one to pull out when you want to describe how Welsh sounds to people who have never heard it spoken. When I finally decided to put my album together, I wanted Welsh music to be represented on it in addition to Irish and Scottish music. I set out to put together a set of traditional Welsh tunes, and I turned to YouTube to find them. I worked with a licensing company to help with research on whether these tunes and songs were in the public domain or not, and there were 2 tunes in this set in particular that stumped the professional researchers. I needed to get on with the process, so I looked up a music library in Wales to call. I spoke to the publishing officer at the Wales Millennium Centre in Cardiff, Ethan Davis. I had found this tune from a YouTube video you can find if you search 09 Tune Chain Elsa Davis, where she introduces various Welsh fiddle tunes she's learned through the years. I learned from her introduction that it is called Puro Vesir, and it is a galliard, which is defined as a sprightly dance with 5 steps to a phrase popular in the 16th and 17th centuries. I sent Ethan the YouTube video for reference, and he wrote a fascinating response. He said that the tune translates to pure of measure, and I'll quote the rest for you here. I had a look through the oldest and unfortunately uncatalogued section of our library for any clues, and I found a tune called A Pural Vesir, spelled Ypuralvesur. It's old enough that both the word pural and the letter V have both disappeared from the Welsh language. The book was published in 1839, as far as I can see, so it's well out of copyright. I've attached a picture. The book was too old and fragile to get in the scanner, as you may find it of some interest." End quote. I love that connection with the past he shared with me. As for the second tune, The Gilded Room, I found it in a YouTube video simply called Welsh Jigs, played by Christine Cooper. For that one, I contacted Blanche Rowan, the company manager for Folk Arts Development for Wales. She put me in touch with Ms. Cooper, and she told me the tune comes from a book by famous Welsh player Cas Maedig. The tune was listed as traditional there, so there was the proof I needed to move forward with licensing the rest of the album. It was quite the journey to delve into these little-known Welsh tunes. I especially love learning tunes that are a little obscure, definitely not overplayed. So I recorded this Welsh tune set with my dear cellist friend Ed Willett, and we affectionately called it the Welsh Beast because it was a beast to keep together. The set ranges from the delicate to the fiery. It's still one of my favorite sets to play. The last 3 tunes' traditional status was easier to come by. The third tune is from an old Welsh song about an old maid who has lost her beloved and for whom new potatoes would grow on apple trees before she finds another love. The last 2 tunes are 2 distinct tunes that both translate to the same thing in English, the cuckoo's nest. There are a lot of tunes called the same thing. I hope you've enjoyed this Welsh music research journey as much as I did. Without further ado, here is the Welsh Beast set.
enjoyed that Welsh Beast set by Liesel Wilson. That is from her album, The Path. And if you enjoy it, then support what you love. The musicians on this podcast are happy to share their music freely with you. You can find their music on streaming music sites. But streaming is a way to sample the music. If you hear something you love, the artists need your support. Please visit their website, sign up to their mailing list, and buy something. Your purchase allows all of us to keep making music. And if you're not into the physical stuff, many artists accept tips or are on Patreon. So please support the arts. And if the show made you happy, you can join the Gunrunners Club on Patreon. Your support pays for the production and promotion of my music and this podcast. If you have questions or comments, please email me and save 15% with an annual membership. All right, before I get to my story, it's time to buy local. We chat today with Rob, the brewmaster for the Lost Druid Brewery. He's going to share with you how he names his beers. And I love how he names them and the pop culture references that he adds to many, including the little-known secret behind the name Dr. Strange. Here is Rob from the Lost Druid Brewery in Avondale Estates, Georgia.
The names for our beers, I try to keep in theme with us being the Lost Druid. Every name that's there has come from something that I've encountered through my readings. Some of them, as I mentioned, the whole Druid aspect of it was, as a result of a conversation I had with a friend that played D&D. I've actually gone now and I've paid more attention to a lot of the role-play games that are out there these days, like D&D and World of Warcraft and, all these Diablo and things like that. And there have actually been many cases where I've come up with a name for a beer and then found in some of those role-playing games they have that exact same name. And then, of course, people immediately are like, oh, you got this from Diablo. And I was like, well, I do know it's there, but no, actually I came up with it before I found out it was there. But I think that's where some of the folks that are creating things in those games clearly have the exact same mindset I have, in terms of where I want to go with certain, combinations of things. But we try to keep it kind of old world, somewhat druidish in nature, but it's not always necessarily old world. Some of the things are things that you kind of got to look through. What's the word I'm looking for? Not cultural history, but pop culture. Yes, kind of pop culture history, like our Dreamt, our porter. I've had a lot of people that don't understand that reference yet, and I've had quite a few beers that I've done like that where I'm waiting for someone to come up to me and be like that. So Dreamt, way back in the day in Marvel, there was actually a Dr. Dreamt.
Dr. Dreamt.
There was a Dr. Dreamt that was also known as Dr. Druid for a few issues.
Oh, nice.
Dr. Dreamt then later became Dr. Strange.
Really?
Yes.
That's fantastic. I love it.
So that's where that kind of goes through, and it had the fact that it was, at a few issues, it was Dr. Druid, and that's why we call that one Dreamt. And I will occasionally do that from some type of pop culture thing, or I'll pull something out and wait for somebody to see if they end up getting what the reference is. But in some weird way, it still comes back to kind of Druid, because that had to do with the fact that it was a Dr. Druid at the time as well. And come back to it. When we go over to our sours kind of, they have a little bit more loose rules in our naming on what we're doing. Sometimes they're a little Druid related, nature related, sometimes not, just depending on where we're at. And then our seltzers are just kind of a free reign. We tend to match the names of our seltzers to the flavor profiles. So with the fact we have one up there called Gin and Jazz, really that's for the ginger and the jasmine that's in that one. And then the Mirage, we have prickly pear and key lime in that, but the prickly pear nature of that being, kind of almost a cactus type plant. That was just about kind of being out in the desert, and, it's the Mirage you see and you want to drink.
Yeah. Awesome.
Specifically, I want to talk about the famine, about the fact that there never really was one. But there was no famine, see, Irish people were only allowed to eat potatoes, only
while she battled the country on the armored guard, doing the white the Irish people stole. And then on the middle of all this, they gave us money not to teach to the Irish. And so we lost our history, and this is what I think is still hurting me. Look around, you can't escape it. I've been there, I've gone through it, I'm obligated. 10 million a day on bombs, you can't beat them. Prioritize human lives, babies are screaming. The motherless, the fatherless is the worst. All alone, they roam, tears of hurt. Potato chips, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That ain't nothing, oh yeah, here comes winter. Cut your hours, less pay, you need assistance. But the bracket to fall ain't you're excluded. Cross the line, tip to do the crime. Looking over your shoulder for your family, provide out. In the streets, more and more, I see them sleep, stepping over bodies, what's happening to my country. Look around, you can't escape it. Look around, it's all around. Look around, you can't escape it. Look around, it's all around. Allez, mais qu'est-ce qu'il se passe ici? Personne n'a toujours rien compris. On retient pas les bonnes leçons de l'histoire. On veut nous laisser dans le noir, y'a des millions de gamins qui crèvent encore la dalle. Y'a des milliards d'euros pour fabriquer des balles. C'était la misère en Irlande il y a un siècle et demi. Partout dans le monde on refait les mêmes conneries. Partout tout le monde refait la même connerie.
That was Doolin from their self-titled album, track called Famine. They have a new album that's coming out. I don't know when. I think I saw on their website June, but I'm not sure. I don't remember right now. So, but check them out because they do make some fantastic music. They're out of France, so which is just amazing. You know, all the great Celtic music. I didn't even mention, but Tuatha Danann, they're out of Brazil. So, of course, I had them on a episode at the beginning of last year in 2020. When I got to record with Tuatha Danann for a track called, they call it the Devil Drink Cider, I think they called it, it's a rockin' version of Johnny Jump Up. Go check that out. In the meantime, we're going to visit the story of Wherever I May Roam. Now, originally I was going to talk about the famous Scottish song Loch Lomond, but it seems I already talked about it in show number 199. So instead, I fly back to Texas in April to perform at Sherwood Forest Fair. My daughters are making the journey as well, and it got me thinking about when I started flying. I don't really remember exactly. I was talking to my dad about it. He reminded me that during summers when we lived in Maryland, he would drive us to visit his family in East Texas. His parents would then drive us halfway to meet my mom's parents. We'd stay in San Antonio for a while, then we would fly home. I totally forgot about this, but it was me and my brother on an airplane together. Now, fast forward to 1985, the two of us flew for the first time to Italy to visit my mom. Then in 1989, I think it was, I flew all by myself. It might have been 97 too. I forget now, but I flew all by myself for the first time to visit my mom in Italy. And talking to my dad, I realized my love of travel began in part because of those trips, especially on the airplane. Visiting Europe, of all places, it made a huge impact on my life. I flew to Hawaii to visit my dad and stepmom during college, and the next vacation I flew back to Italy. We drove up to Germany, France, and even saw the Floriade in the Netherlands, which is a big flower festival. It was spectacular. I love traveling, and so it was fitting when I met my wife in 2009 that she too had a love of traveling. We love to roam. However, it wasn't until 2013 or 2014 that I finally wrote my first good love song for my wife. I had actually written a lullaby earlier, like that when we met, and it was just not good. There were others in there too, but they never really went anywhere. And this is one of my favorite songs that I wrote, and it's a song called Wherever I May Roam. And I remember it was really easy to write too. The music I based on how I had been playing Gypsy Rover. So, in fact, it used to be in the same key. I changed the Gypsy Rover version that I perform now to F, and originally I was playing it in D. And so I changed, when I went to Wherever I May Roam, It's a much more comfortable vocal level, so I started playing in D, and it worked out great. Now, one of the big goals was to write a song that was a call and response. That is to say, something that I could sing and audience members could respond to the lyric I sang. But it's the story that made it a love song. It was set up in 3 parts. The first was my life before I met Gwen. And my life was a bit rough before. I was in a band, but I did not feel like I was growing as a musician or as a person. I was always wanting to find love, and I had to make a change. So I broke up the band in 2008. I moved from Austin to New Orleans, and I tried to start over, just shake everything up. I remember back in high school that every year I could sort of change my persona to be more like someone I wanted to be rather than who I was. But it required a radical shift. It usually began, you couldn't do it later in the year. It was, right when school started. Now, ultimately, I learned that I couldn't change who I actually was. It was very superficial, and I always reverted back to who I ultimately was. But I did learn that the radical shift could do wonders for your life. So the breakup of the band was sad for many of our fans, but the move to New Orleans, it kickstarted my new life, and I started writing new music. I recorded a ton of new albums. It launched Celtic Invasion Vacations. It also got me out on tour at a little house concert in Reston, Virginia, where I met my wife, and that's what the second verse is all about. The final verse, sometimes when you're a musician in a band, you start playing music together, just music, and a groove catches on. Groove seems like the wrong word because it's not really about rhythm. It's about playing in sync together. It just matches. It just works. And as a budding singer-songwriter, I wanted something that was more than just a groove. I wanted a song, a beautiful song that leads to other songs. And I really realized that that's what Wherever I May Roam is. That's what it is and what it was. I wrote my first love song for my wife. It told our story, but it also blossomed into children and more adventures than I could possibly have hoped for. And likewise, the song also was the true start of my rhythm and folk musical style on the otter harp, the thumb lead, as they said at the California Otter Harp Gathering. And it's still one of my favorite songs to sing, so I hope you will enjoy it. It is on my brand new album, Celtfather. You can get it. You can buy it on my Bandcamp store. You go to magerecords.com, or you can head on over and listen to it on streaming if you want to hear the full album in its entirety. Go check it out, please. If you enjoy the music you love, I am a full-time musician, so this is how I make my living. So if you can support it, I'd greatly appreciate it. Here is Wherever I May Roam.
In younger days, I used to wander through the lonely lanes of life, spin out of control, dizzy and alone, nothing running right. Now I have love inside me, wherever I may roam. I have a family beside me, I'm never alone. I turn my back on dissonance, struck on the chord and hit it twice, raced toward the sun and a new world begun. And then I met my wife. Now I have love inside me, wherever I may roam. I have my family beside me, I'm never alone. Chips in the streets of London, savored a beat in New Orleans. All we walked in cold rain, Galway town. She's prettier than a dream. Music alone was my one companion, but songs alone have no melody. Now there's adventure and love in my life, and then the cries of our baby. Now I have love inside me, wherever I may roam. I have my family to
All right, next time we're talking about Kilty pleasure, and we have a story from the Muckers. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back again in a couple weeks. Talk to you soon. Sláinte. Pub Songs Podcast is produced by Mark Gunn. The show is edited by Mitchell Peterson with graphics by Miranda Nelson Designs. You can subscribe and listen wherever you find podcasts. You can also subscribe to my mailing list. You'll get regular updates of new music, podcasts, special offers, and you'll get 21 songs for free. Welcome to the pub at pubsong.com.